Now we're back in business, and overcasting, that's just,
You're not going to do the blanket stitch?
oh, well, I threaded new thread, and this is part of this, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a bar tack on this. Okay, let's go to the bar tack. Overcasting the seam, it's just doing the diagonal basting, and so all you're doing is bringing this up. This is the substitute for, what do you call it? Serging. So if you go and buy yourself a beautiful couture garment, these seams are hand overcast. They are not run on a sewing machine or a serger. So they overcast those seams by hand.
All? Or
all of them.
Certain
There's
fabrics?
no such thing as a serger in a couture house.
Do they do it more for some fabrics than others?
Yeah.
Okay, which ones do they do it more for?
Well, definitely the ones that ravel. So the ones that are real fine, like a tightly woven crepe de chine. It's like that polka dot right there. They may overcast that. They might just leave it raw. That's the funny thing about, if you see real couture garments that are done in a couture house, they are often not as finished as what we'll do. And they don't really have sewing machines. They do everything by hand. It's really quite different.
So that edge is just folded over?
No, this is just...
Oh, it's just a raw edge.
Just a raw
so you
edge.
do the overcasting on the raw edge.
Yeah, you just overcast it.
Do you do that to the lining as well, or no? Just the...
Well, we use sergers, but when you in your jackets, you guys, do not serge your wools unless it's extremely ravelly, which you had to do because hers raveled like crazy, even with the iron-on interfacing. So you would only serge it if you absolutely have to, because you need to stop the raveling. Okay, with the bar tack, you can see it has an extra thick thread. This one is not as thick, so it's not going to show quite so much. But coming up through the back side, when you have thicker thread, it certainly is a lot easier to do. You just feed the thread through the loop and tighten it. Let me hold it from the back so it doesn't slip on me. Okay. And you just stack them right very close to each other and make your stitch.
Is that for like pocket edges or something? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at the edge of pockets, especially on a man's jacket, you'll see that they have done a bar tack right at the edges of the pockets so that when they put their hand in it, they don't pull the pocket out. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So it's, if you look on your jeans are also bar tacked, so that when you put your, well, or they have a rivet. Let me see, mine's got a rivet. So if you check your jeans, sometimes you'll see a bar tack, a thread bar tack, where they've sewn it so that it does prevent you from pulling out the edge of your...
And it's always parallel along the seam, right? Not perpendicular.
Yeah, exactly right. Mm-hmm. So you just make a loop and then put the needle in there and pull it. And you stack them all against that top edge. And as you work along, it will then start to form this little bead, okay? Let's do the thread eye, starting from where I am right now, so. Okay. When you do the thread eye, and this is all in those handouts, so you can look on YouTube at the handout, and you can also no, that's not going to look good. I'll take that one out. The thread eye you would use above the top of a zipper on a dress because you don't want a metal hook and eye. You want just the metal hook and a thread eye. So make the stitch, and you can imagine that if you're doing a thread eye, it's relatively small, right? So I pull it tight, and then I take the needle and I loosen it just a little bit, and I do 2, and I have a double thread, so I will end up with a total of 4 threads to do the thread eye around. And I put my thumb on it just to stop all the twisting, which silk thread tends to be even more prone to the twisting than the Gutermann. Alright, so I put my needle back under it. And as you tie the knots around it, which is your next step, it tends to get a little bigger. So when you're trying to estimate how small you want your eye to be, make it on the smaller side because it tends to grow a little bit as you do this. So I tie the knot and I slip the knot towards the base, and by tying the knot I'm saying that I'm putting the needle inside the loop, and then I pull the loop.
So you're just chain stitching around it?
Yeah,
Oh,
just
okay.
chain stitching around, and then I slide it so that they stack up against each other. That makes sense? Okay. So again, just sticking it under, putting the needle through the loop, pull the loop here, and then slide it towards your previous knots, and then they'll start to, if you have thicker thread, then they'll look like that. You'll have a little thread eye that you would put your hook into on a garment.
You just go all the way to the other end.
Yeah, you go all the way to the other end, yeah. And then you just, you know, put your needle through the back side and tie it. So you would
Knot it off.
finish it off like that. And then just tie it in the back. You're done. Okay. All right. And the French tack is exactly the same thing, it's just longer. It's not different. It's just longer, bigger stitch. And where you put a French tack, yeah, or a swing tack, you'll hear them called both things. Like you would, if you had a dress and there was a lining, and you don't want the lining slipping all around the inside of the dress, so you would just swing tack the lining seams to the dress seams. And they're usually 1.5 to 2 inches. If you look inside of a long wool coat, you know, one down to here, not a jacket, they don't sew the lining to the bottom of the hem of a jacket. The lining hem hangs separate from the jacket, from the coat. They're 2 separate things, and they are connected and held in place with the swing tack. Okay, so look inside a long wool coat. Probably be a vintage one. They may not do that so much anymore. Okay, and that's pretty much it. You're on your own. Okay.
So that other one, the blanket stitch, is that basically the same thing as the overcast, except it's vertical?
Yeah, just
and
let
not
me see if I
diagonal?
can get my needles threaded. It's just that nasty here. Don't start until we get